So right now, it's time actually to hand over to our very special guest for today, or guests, Matt Powers and his son James. So I'm going to hand over the reins to Maya now to introduce them and to start the conversation rolling. And hopefully, also you've brought some questions as well. So I'm just going to make sure that I'm on speak of you now, and you might want to do the same. And can we ping?
Hey.
Hi, Matt. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Hello.
It is awesome to see you all. Hey, everybody.
So,
and I have only one mic, so when we switch to interview him, I'll give him the mic. Okay. You can sit down or stay on camera. I don't know.
So for those who don't know, Matt is a permaculture author and he lives in America, and he's written a new book called Soil, which just came out recently, among many other really cool books. And he's also created a curriculum for schools about permaculture that's been in place. And yeah, he was a high school teacher and he saw that, so he made his own curriculum for that. With our festival, our focus this month is Observe and Interact. So the song we had before was Look Around. And so I was wondering, what's your take on the principle and how would you describe it and teach it to others?
Yeah, so because I've written for different levels, I've created like different definitions for the same concept. And as I've gone over it over and over again, I feel like observation is kind of they're like the capstones, they're the bookends of whatever we're doing. So to begin with, and that's what we talk about, observe and then interact. But you have to observe what the effect was of your interaction. And then that's going to iterate into another action in a reaction to that observation. So it really is, it's very scientific. And that's what I really love about permaculture, because it opens this door to applying this scientific rigor and lens into all these other spaces of our lives. And so observation is a perpetual reflective tool that will allow us, and I think of it as reflective because you're taking in information and then you're going through it, you're letting it into you, letting it settle, and you're developing a fluency. Essentially, you're developing a deeper understanding so that you can actually act within it. You can speak that language, whether it's the way that water flows down that hill or the way that you are growing your garden. It becomes your understanding. And I think that is only through observation, and that's really how we originally learn. We are observing and taking everything in through our senses. We're, helpless babies when we're born, and we observe everything around us. We take it all in, and without any instruction, we start doing it back. We start babbling and then figure out words, and no one's like instructing babies. It's incredible. Just like no one's out in the woods, fertilizing the forest. It's very similar. And so I feel like observation is this perpetual principle, and like I said, it's the bookends on everything that we do in permaculture, but it's so scientific. I mean, you're going to make a hypothesis, which is an observation, a potential observation, and then you're going to test it and see if that observation was true. And then at the end, you're going to reflect about it and be like, that observation wasn't quite true, but now I think I observed this, and that's a new hypothesis, and this perpetual process is also what it is to grow and to become the people we are. We become better observers of ourselves and how we interact with each other, and better observers of the world around us, and how we can interact with it. So I see it not just as where to place the garden and seeing where the sun path goes. And it is that, and it's vital and critical, but I see that as the starting place for applying all these things to all parts of our lives.
Yeah. And so, yeah, permaculture is a really good way to segue from the science into like the more deeply understanding it. And so I was just wondering, how did you get into permaculture to start off with? Because we've all got our separate stories, but I was wondering, what's your specific?
I was at a dead-end job. I was deeper and deeper into debt, and my wife continuously was getting cancer, and we had a baby and a young child. So I was desperate to figure out how to grow enough food that's organic, because couldn't afford it. And I always wanted, organic food, but it was so much money, and I was a school teacher, and I was living in a garage. And this was like after I was a musician, and I had done the whole thing when music, I was on TV and all that. I had like left all that behind when my wife started getting sick and we started having kids. And so I was stuck at this job, and I didn't have anywhere I could go. I was in the 6th most violent county in America. And so I felt this enormous pressure, and I responded. Initially, before I heard about permaculture, I don't think I responded very well. I mean, I started doing gardening organically and stuff, and I started the seasonality recipes. That was my start, actually. But I was irritated and frustrated and angry, and I didn't have a clear idea of what I could be hopeful about. I had, my family. I loved my family. I loved what we were doing, but I also saw that there was a dead end. I was in debt. My job wasn't going to get me out of debt. I didn't make enough money there. And I needed to find the good food, because I knew that was something I could control. And that was something that has been proven helps with health, including cancer. And again, I say again, I'm always saying this, but I'm not a doctor, so I'm not like prescribing anything, or whenever we talk about cancer or anything like that. It's just our own personal journey that we went through. But what happened was, I found permaculture answered all the problems I was facing, and then all like the existential threats and problems I was facing on top of it, like all at once. And it was like, wait, there's solutions to all of our problems. It allowed me to like take a step back, be more objective, to breathe, and just be like, oh, you know what? We can do this. This is okay. And the craziness of the world this year, if I hadn't like been well versed in permaculture, I would be a wreck. I would be watching the news. I would be, I don't know. I would be in a psychologically bad place. I wouldn't be in a good mood. I wouldn't be thinking good thoughts. But what happened was, I was a school teacher, and I saw this as the solution to everything. And this sometimes happens. People get the permaculture fever, and I got it. And I just started like stamping everything with permaculture everywhere I went. Like, you can make that permaculture, like just like everywhere I went. And so I started teaching English class, but released permaculture. And like, and it was at high school, and I started supplying hundreds of families their seeds. I got really crazy. We had, at one point we had 200 chickens, right?
Yeah.
I didn't have any money, so I started like connecting like free pallets into this giant interconnected maze for my chickens. I was very enthusiastic about it. My wife's grandmother thought it was terrible looking. But you know, in our enthusiasm, we tend to make messes sometimes, and then as we organize and clean it up, this will come in handy later when we talk about writing, because this is exactly the same thing. Creativity is, and that's good. But then editing is a different brain, and we cut things up and organize it and make it into these things that are more understandable and communicatable. But I really got into it because it solved everything, and it allowed me to get over the anxiety of living in this current era where common sense is not common, where nice people are sometimes hard to find if you're in the wrong space. And looking at comments online, remember, don't read the comments on things. That's where people get angry, say things. And it's funny, they don't talk that way in person. It's very easy to look online and see all this ugliness and think that's how people are. But the reality is, if we all were, in our mom's kitchen and eating brownies, it all act completely different. So just remember that. And like, that's the kind of thing that like permaculture really like helped me see, because I mean, I come from, out east, and I went to school in New York City. So you walk down the street, you hear every language, you know what I mean? Like, you walk far enough, you'll hear 50 different languages, you know what I mean? And so I love culture. I love seeing cultures work together and come up with new ideas. And permaculture was that. Permaculture is this great convergence of like the best of the best, and without any kind of like competitiveness, this kind of lens where we see the best in each other's systems and we celebrate each other, and it just is a celebration of culture. I have a friend who has a cultural center where they have capoeira, which is a dance martial art. They've got salsa dancing. They've got taiko drumming from Japan. And they're just celebrating all the different cultures. This is in San Diego, if you ever get there and visit. It's amazing. And I saw permaculture as this, it hits all the notes for me. And I know one of your questions later will touch upon this, but I started changing labels on things as I got into things, because I'm an English teacher, and the etymology of words are things I study, which is the history of words, because the words change in their meaning over time. And so I get excited about things, and then I learn deeply about them. And this is a super secret. If you have something that you're enthusiastic about, you will be able to learn 10,000, a million times more than anything that you're not enthusiastic about. And it's incredible what can happen. Our brains do not have a limit of space like our computers do. You know what I mean? They've got a limit, right? But our brains don't. And if you apply passion and enthusiasm, and I believe, this is my belief, that if you add doing the right thing in, it's like, and it blows up, and you've got this endless space to do and think and remember, because remembering all these facts when they talk about nature and stuff can be hard. But if you're passionate about it, you'll remember everything. I mean, remember that younger brother or that cousin that memorized everything about dinosaurs? They just talked forever, right? What was that about? It was because they were passionate, and that's why they could remember all those details. Okay, does that answer?
Yeah. So I'm just gonna skip one question and come back to it because it kind of flows a bit better. So you were talking about schools and giving out seeds. So can you tell us a bit about your permaculture curriculum and how and why you created it? I think you've kind of touched on the why, but
Well, it was interesting. I failed at my second crowdfunder. And what happened was I thought I was got all this momentum. I was like, I'm going to start a school, and it's going to have teepees, and we're going to be outside. And I got all crazy, and it failed. And I was like mortified. And it was like 24 hours left on the Indiegogo. And I was mortified. I couldn't believe it that I was publicly failing after my first Kickstarter went through the roof in 2 days. Like in 2 days it was done and I had succeeded. And that like gave me a little bit of a misunderstanding of how the world works. And I was like, hey, I'll just start a school. You guys are excited? Let's do it. And everyone was like, no, we believe that you can write a book, but we're not so sure you can start a school, Matt. And so they didn't fund it. And I realized it was because my audience was online, and to do a school in person would only apply to the local people. And I realized that I kind of like mourned over it for maybe 8 hours. And then I like closed my door and was like, how do I fail upward here? How do I fail upward? I need to fail upward. And it was like, it's like, you know, you're like in the submarine and the power's cutting out and you're sinking and you got to like figure out where the wires go and everything. Like, it was like that. And I was like, I will make it an online school because that's what they want. And I did. And then, and that somehow got into schools. So I didn't start out trying to like make it for schools. I made it for homeschoolers. And how many of you are homeschoolers? You can raise your hand if you're home. Yeah, homeschoolers. We're homeschool family too. We're actually an unschooling family. In certain states, that's like illegal. But that's why my son is the way he is with music. And I didn't pressure him. He didn't take lessons. And it's very organic. And I make him do things, right? Like I made him do like, you know, chores and permaculture and do all this stuff his whole life because it's just like, you know, we got to live here. But I've really allowed him to like follow his own thing. And so I designed it around homeschoolers, and then they started using it in schools. And I was like, that's not really built for that. Your cooking class, you know, it's got a built-in cooking class, and then seed saving. And so I was like, and I guess seed saving would work because they'd come back. But I was like, it doesn't really work with public schools because you've got that summer when the food's growing and no one's there. And so I like had this understanding that like I was being called and I didn't have the exact tool fit, and they were just willing to just happy to have it. And then I started looking at like what was going on, and I couldn't find any curricular guidelines. So the thing with teachers is we have a very strict modality for what is curriculum. And that means I can't just like create things unless I have got an ethos and a focus behind it. Just like permaculture has principles and ethics, there's a thing like that for educators. And they're the standards, the objectives, and the standards weren't created in permaculture for education for K through 12. I created those and then put them up for public comment and then revised those due to the comments that I received. And it's an ongoing conversation. I would love to see more discussion and push and pull because that's how we grow. But I needed to create this so that people could use it, so that people could see it, so that they could have that discussion. So what I did was I created the standards, and then I created the curriculum that paired with the advanced permaculture student online, and then it got accredited by British Columbia. And it was the first accreditation for any permaculture program by a government body in North America, which was, I didn't do it. Like it's wild. But I didn't do it. That's amazing people. That's people like just feeling like that this is their mission and they did it. And I didn't know what to do, you know, in that space, you know, and I feel incredibly grateful about that. But it was because I did those pieces. I aligned it to next generation science standards and the national science education standards So I aligned, and then I aligned it to the permaculture education standards. So I had a triple standard alignment and the rationale. So a teacher literally could read off to their school board, to their superintendent, to their principal, to their science, the head of their science department, exactly why this was valuable. And that hadn't been done before. And I'm welcome to like more people doing it and bringing more complexity, and because it'll get better and better as more people are involved. I have a master's degree in education. I went to a school that had no books. It was a Apple certified school. So we were all on, it was like pre-corona in a way, but we all had laptops, and I had to literally create curriculum on the fly. And there's still stuff of me online. If you go and type in Lorax essay example, you're going to find me, and like, I think 30 or 50,000 downloads. Like like my stuff is still out there and working. And so I created things for like constantly, and I reacted in real time to my kids. And I say that because I feel like they are my kids. I was always like really, really close to all my students. And I still am. I still talk to many of them regularly. So I created this, it blew up. I've been trying to provide things so that it starts, so that we begin, because it really hasn't begun. I mean, like, I've done some things and they've done some stuff, but we're at the beginning stages. So, I mean, you probably know other parents that are teachers. Some of you probably have parents that are actual teachers, right? Yeah, I see some nods and smiles. And the reality is they have the skills. They understand what needs to happen. And they can just look at my book and, copy and modify and, iterate, because we need more material. So, yeah, I did create those things, but I feel like I have to like honor, all the people that have come before that have like helped me too in that process, because and you have a question later about Elaine Ingham, but there are literally hundreds of mentors who have helped me in permaculture. Permaculture is the most helpful, like, supportive environment community that I've ever seen, and it's international. It crosses every boundary and barrier and definition, and it's amazing. And so yeah, I would say that it's been an incredible process. So, and it's going to continue. I'm just introducing these ideas that these things should be. So.
So we know that the bushfires have been super close to you, and also last year we had big bushfires here as well. So how has this close encounter influenced how you think and use permaculture?
It's a great question. So there's like thresholds to lands and their zones. So there's like a threshold to like this property that I'm on, and it's a bit of an illusion. So we've got this situation in California. It's different from Australia in many ways. And I'm not going to get into how in particular on the Australian side. But ours is that we just didn't cut the forest for hundreds of years, and then, or no, for 100 years, over 100 years. And then, well, we cut the forest in such a way, and then we didn't cut the forest. And so we created these gullies by putting these opposite of keyline earthworks, opposite of swales. We cut them into the gullies, where the water would flow. So they would send these logs down, and they would clear cut this. And then they let it all grow back without proper management that you would do in your forest, in your zone 5. So they're not limbing up to 18 feet. They're not managing the underbrush. They dried out the landscape by designing it so that all the water would flow as fast as possible down these former logging roads that would go into these gullies. And then they started draining all the water with strategic dams. Like they used keyline design but for evil purposes, basically. Like they figured out all the pinch points in the land where the water will collect, and they collected it all and then piped it to all the cities and agriculture. And of course, this is chemical ag. So we're talking about oxidized. So we're talking about it requiring 4 times as much water. So, and that's just the process of you know, having oxidized soil. Any form of nitrate, any form of nitrogen turns into nitrate within hours. So it's always going to require 4 times as much water molecularly. And they're transporting it in open concrete vessels that are lipped up on the sides so that the heat conducts down. So they're drying out all the water as it flows down the mountains away from the watersheds. So for me, it feels very much like we designed this in a very efficient, man-made way. And when I jump out from our situation, we're on this little mountain on the end of a back road on a long driveway. And we don't have water for like 2 to 3 months of the year. And so it's really difficult. And so this area, what it needs is like strategic, meticulous logging, because they've made it impossible financially to pay the fees to log your site. And these are redwoods. So they grow up like weeds around their bases. They're the perennial logger's paradise. You cut them down and they regrow. And in fact, the Native Americans used to be able to put these wedges in them, and they would actually pop out boards. I know it sounds like magic, but they literally would do this. They would chop into the wood, and they would chop like a board out into the living tree, and then put wedges and hammer the wedges in until they would pop out a board, and then the tree would heal up again. These are like magical trees in that way. And they're not being managed because they've made it so costly to manage, and they've put so much red tape, and it's a really complicated problem. So permaculture needs to educate all these folks on the common sense management of the forest, because we have extremes. Either they cut it all the way down, and then it creates these corridors of dryness that cause fires, or they don't cut it at all, and then it's just so brushy that you know, with the climate changing, that there's fires. And also throw in, like, you know, questionable power companies who are on profit-based models, and their lines supercharge and spark and start fires, and their gas lines explode, and it's really an unfortunate situation. But it is literally every step of the way. It's like, well, if they thought about their future and their children's future and the environmental consequences of that, they would have never, ever done any of that. They wouldn't have cut the corners. They wouldn't have designed the water system this way. It just goes on and on. And so it goes back to education. And then going back to the original thing, thresholds. It's like so much of California needs to be put into like reparative zone 5, where we're doing tons of work as if we're setting up for like a big site, and then we're letting nature take over. And that's kind of it. And letting the water soak back in, and letting the animals come back, and then maybe doing prescribed burns and having grazers move in so that those burns don't get out of control. You know, so you have grazing lanes that you know, chop it up essentially into the patchwork framework that the Australian Aborigines did for, estimated 30,000, 40,000 years. We don't know. But it's that kind of wisdom, that kind of deep understanding that we need to start up, like educating each other and being, you know, the voice for. Some people say we're being the voice for nature, and I think that, you know, permaculture is the facility for that. And the fires, you know, we've had 2 fires on our road. We've been evacuated once, and it feels crazy because no one is doing what's necessary. The conversations aren't being had, and it's clear that we need to be drastic. So yeah, it's a very difficult position that we're in, and I can only say that it's education, it's talking about it, it's talking about the common senseness of these things. You know, it's like, there's no water up there. There hasn't been water up there that's been allowed to soak in for 50 years, 60 years. So of course it's going to be like just going to light up if someone sneezes. So yeah, that's the bushfires here.
There was a video that I did with David Holmgren after the fires in Australia recently, and he was talking about similar types of things, about the need to be managing our forest differently, to be actually getting in and with the grazers, and that it's something that we could each be doing. And so I really recommend that. I might actually put a link with the replay too to that video too, of David speaking about the exact same things that you're talking about. So yeah, great. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, I did.
I'm sure he'll do a better job.
Yeah. I noticed you were like talking about planning for the future and stuff, and like on like in books and stuff it says future care instead of fair share, which is the one I know.
Right.
So yeah. Why do you
Yeah.
that way?
Yeah. So when I first read Bill Mollison's Permaculture Designer's Manual, it said return of surplus, control of population, and to the furtherment of the first 2 ethics. And that last part I saw as the principle behind that ethic, where it was about making sure that earth care and people care continued. So this idea of fair share, though, gets political in my country, because who decides what's fair? Who portions out what's fair? And we have a knee-jerk reaction in America because of like the Cold War. And so we're like, well, in Russia, they decided what was fair, and then there was an unfairness. And then when you think about fair share, and I don't know, moms don't give their fair share. Moms give way more. And it's all because they care about the future. And fair share, if we think about what we're talking about, that's actually people care and earth care. So it's like, if you're returning, you know, surplus to the land and making sure you're, you know, adding compost and fertilizing the land and making sure you're taking care of the earth, you know, that return of surplus, that's earth care. And then people care, I started thinking about this more deeply. And because of my education as a teacher, there's interpersonal, between people care. There's intrapersonal, that's care for ourselves. You know, what kind of voice do you hear in your head when you're alone? Is it a voice that's encouraging you? Or is it a negative voice? And if it's a negative voice, that's going to take some work to fix, but it's the most important thing to fix. Because if you have a voice that's in your head always telling you that you're not good enough or something like that, it's going to affect everything else you do in your life. And so people care starts, I believe, in many ways with being able to take care of ourselves and being okay with who we are and ourselves, and being like, I know I am enough. I am good enough. And I'm on the path to being better, you know, no matter where I'm at, right? And that's what allows us to truly, honestly, authentically care for other people. And so and then the economic and then governance is also, those are forms of care that we can design. Like my business, when I think about my business and I meditate on it, I think about helping people. I see people using it. I see people eating better food and their kids being healthier and happier. And you know what I mean? It's like that can be the true people care. Like, and that ideally is actually what an economy should be. It should serve the people's needs. And then governance, they're a form of care. And it's like, that's what, like, you know, the parents are kind of like the government and the family, right? And it's like we're facilitators when we're doing our best, not dictators. Like, you know, teachers, they facilitate the greatness of their students versus just lecture. You know what I mean? So that's what I saw when I started like really getting in. And that's why there's these circles within circles in my permaculture shirt, because I saw in future care, long-term investments. There's the return of surplus, long-term planning. So thinking as we design all these things out into the future, thinking how we're going to care for people in the future, how we're going to care for the earth in the future. And then management, monitoring, and adaptation. If we're not thinking about these things, about how they will play out in the future and monitoring them and managing them in real time, they're not going to get, I love the idea of return of surplus, but I believe that iterating those pieces will allow us to arrive at the principle behind those things better. So that's what I was thinking. And then also, I started on the path of future care because someone told me that 7 generations, the Iroquois philosophy of like thinking for the future really embodied the third ethic better, because they're always practicing reciprocity. And so I was like, that's cool. And then Starhawk, who you all may know, I don't know, said she heard it at the African PDC, the African Permaculture Convergence years ago, and she used it. So I felt like I was in good company. I felt like it really fit and allowed us to reposition things so that we could reach more people. It wouldn't have that knee-jerk reaction with a lot of Americans. and we would arrive at more common sense sooner. So that's why I did that.
Great response. Thanks, Matt. There's a lot to think about in there too. So many different ideas woven together, and I'd love for us to explore this more. Maybe, you know, in future Permayouth weekly conversations, you know, really talking, getting deeper into the ethics. I think it's a really exciting topic to explore. So thanks for that background to your thinking. It's wonderful.
Yeah. So just noticed the time, but just before we go to James, I'd just like to pose the question of you know, how you're spending time with Dr. Elaine Ingham, and yeah, can you just tell us a bit about like her work, and also what you learned from her and how it changed your view on soils?
And your latest book too. Tell us about that. Yeah.
Yeah, so what was really wild was Elaine Ingham helped me overcome my stigma of thinking I wasn't good at science. Seems kind of weird, right? I'm like the science guy now. I was an English teacher. I was a history teacher. I was a music teacher. And I didn't do well in biology class when I was in 9th grade as a very, very young man. And I just wasn't ready. It was honors biology. It was way too hard. Have you taken a class that was way too hard ever? You know what I'm talking about. And it put a bad taste in my mouth because everyone else was like smarter and doing well. And I was like, I don't get it. And so I was like, sure that I wasn't good at this stuff. And then like Elaine made it so easy, so understandable, and really made it fun. And I just was able to let go of that previous definition of myself and then see myself not from a limited mindset, but from a growth mindset. And she helped me with my first book, and she was super kind, super nice. Just really nice. I mean, my first book, you know, very introductory, not much information, you know what I mean? A thin little book. And she just, you know, said nice things. And it was awesome. It gave me the encouragement that I needed to keep going. And then she really educated me while writing the Purple Book, and which is the Permaculture Student 2. And it opened a door that I got really interested in the soil, because I saw it as this like linchpin. I love linchpins. The ethics give us this like really good control. It allows us to make very clear, easy decisions. And so I love that. I just love boiling things down to like what's true, but also what's like got a lot of leverage to it. And so I worked with her out a lot, and I would ask things like, yeah, but what is that visually? I can't see that, Elaine. It's like, that's, you know, that's not my language. I'm not fluent in that, you know? And so she really helped me gain a fluency through visuals, and it gave me the confidence to dig deeper. And then I went off the deep end in directions that she didn't cover. And I ended up talking to French scientists that are like highly respected, published CIRAD scientists, and I started talking to cutting edge farmers, and I started reading all the scientific journals, like the ones that like are gobbledygook. Like I started reading those and then just looking up everything. And it's amazing. We have these science encyclopedias online. They tell you the answers. And so I just spent a year like reading everything behind everything, behind everything, behind everything, behind everything, behind everything. And it was like a rabbit hole. But I got down to a certain level of fluency, and once you go through the cell wall in the plant, my fluency starts dipping. But up into the threshold of interacting with the cell walls inside the plant roots, and then all the nutrient cycles, ecological and even pollution cycles, I mapped, and they weren't visually all of them mapped. So let's say cobalt wasn't mapped. Let's say like copper wasn't perfectly mapped, because everyone was coming at it from their own perspective. And then I paired that understanding with the contents of all our natural farming and permaculture soil solutions, so that you actually know what they do. Because everyone's like, oh, compost, just do compost. You guys all know there's different kinds of compost, right? Of course there is. You make it out of like cow manure, it's going to be completely different out of like the chicken manure, right? You can just smell that. Or out of leaf mold, or out of, you know, whatever. But there wasn't an understanding of why it was different. Even in the 90s, they were killing plants with compost and had no idea why. And Elaine Ingham was the one who told me that. And so I was like, I love mystery. I want to get down to it. And so I boiled it all down. It is recommended for college. So it is highly visual, and it has very clear how-to. So anyone could use it, and you could look at those things and could understand collegiate and graduate school level science, because it's visual. But it is, and it's also written in the way I talk. Like that's what I always try to do, so that it's super understandable. But yeah, it's hyper like, it's inorganic and organic chemistry combined. So it's molecular biochemistry. So yeah, it's a lot of fun. But yeah, that's what that new book is. And there's never been a book like it. And I didn't set out to do that. I set out to kind of like document what was going on and like find out like what actually was in that thing. And I ended up discovering a whole universe and meeting all these incredible people that are like explorers of that universe. Because let's just put it this way. Elaine Ingham is an expert on soil biology, but we've only mapped 1% of all the soil biology. So we're at the beginning, and you all are invited. It's like wide open territory. Like you all could be learning this, and you could be an expert at this. And by the time you're 18, you could be a leader in this. It's literally that wide open. And my book will give you really deep insights into what's possible and where to look if you were interested in that. Yeah, so that's regenerative soil. And that's on pre-order, though the printing process is beginning right now. I'm very excited to say. And I'm eating up so much time, so I should go. But if you guys want to check out any of my books, the Permaculture Student 1 and 2 are free, because it's a human right to know all this stuff. I wanted it in schools. Everyone wanted it in public schools. So I'm like, hey, they kickstarted it for me. They paid it forward to me. I pay it forward to you. So go to the permaculturestudent.com. And there, it's free on there. You do need an email, so maybe a parent can like do that part. But yeah, it's all there. So feel free to dive into all that.
Thank you so much, Matt. That's brilliant. And I think I kind of can feel some soil sessions coming on in the Permayouth as well. So we're going to dive right into that. It's phenomenal. Thank you for doing that work. So I think maybe, do you want to welcome in your amazing son to join us? And
yes.
Before you go though, you're not going to go just yet, but thank you. It's been just an absolute pleasure and honor to have you joining us in the show today and in the festival today, and sharing your insights and your perspectives and just the backstory to what you do, and linking us to all your amazing resources too. I know everyone's going to dive out and dive into those, and I'll make sure that as the recording of this goes out, I'll make sure that I'll put all the links to all of those as well. Thank you. So would you like to introduce James for us? Or James, you can introduce yourself.
Sure, I'll introduce myself. I'm James Duncan Powers, obviously Matt Powers' son. It's so excited to be here. It's crazy. It's awesome.
Yeah.
So you mentioned, Matt mentioned that you're unschooled. So I'm unschooled, and I know heaps of people here are homeschooled/unschooled as well. So how is that going for you, and what also do you love about permaculture?
I love it, and I get to do what I love. It's like I get to I build my own guitars, so I get to learn about carpentry. I get to learn about electronics. I get to learn about music. I get to learn about how to use like natural like dyes, so that I don't like hurt the environment or whatever. But yeah, it's wonderful. Like I like the basics, math, English, science, but it's like all my friends are like, you have so much time. I'm like, I'm recording.
Electronics is science.
Yeah, but it's like, but all my friends are like, you're recording an album. They're all in like school with like masks, and they're like little like private like circle, and they can't like touch anything. But yeah, I absolutely love it. I love permaculture because it's like you get to like grow your own gardens, and like you're independent from the food system. Like if we didn't have a garden during coronavirus, like it's just like it doesn't even make sense. Like you get to like grow your own food, you get to actually like it's insurance. You get to be independent. So if there was a food crisis, or you had to evacuate over, you have all this garden food, or you have all your food storage canned from all your vegetables, from all what you've grown, you can take that and you can bring it. I just love that part. It's like you can be independent from everyone else and not just.
Why? Share a story of like why, like how corresponding all the fires there.
Oh yeah. Well, during my childhood, what was so like really fun is that I get to like show people like, well, guys, I just grew this like new like Peruvian corn that's really rare. And I was like showing all my friends, and they're like, dude, corn? Really? It's like, but like I loved it so much, and like it was just like it's just fun. Because it's like I get to like grow like the most rarest corn ever and then eat it. It's like I thought that was amazing.
That is amazing. And they're so incredibly colorful too. I can imagine they're just like nothing else that you could ever possibly get in the store. That's just,
yeah,
really great.
Yeah, so what inspires you with your music and what you do?
Certainly my dad. Like my dad is a musician and will be a musician always, because he was a professional musician even before he was like a teacher or whatever. And it's like when I was like a kid, like how he would go on that tour for a little bit, he stopped because he had to like actually get like a real job and actually supply for the family or whatever. because music business is really hard to earn money. And it's like, I love music so much, but like, I want to like do my music, but then I want to like start a mushroom business or like write books, because I think that's what actually earns money. And actually, me and my dad are going to start a cordyceps business. We're going to grow cordyceps. Yeah. We're going to start a cordyceps business and do tinctures.
Yeah.
Very cool. Very, very cool. You kind of like peas in a pod. I know that's kind of like a little bit, you just so, I mean, so many of your mannerisms. It's so wonderful to meet you and to hear how permaculture has influenced your life, and also how, you know, how Matt as a permaculture parent is raising such an amazing young man too. Yeah, awesome.
So yeah, we hear you write songs about permaculture. Do you want to share one? You got your guitar.
Did I start that rumor? Is it my fault?
I don't write songs just about permaculture technically. I just kind of write songs. It's like, I think it don't have a really specific message or whatever. It's usually
You don't have words.
I don't have words. I don't sing. I want to sing. I'm just horrible. You don't want to hear me. But it's like I usually just name the songs and how was I feeling that day or whatever happened that day or that week or whatever. I don't really have any.
But you're inspired by nature.
Yeah, I have a song named Petrichor. I have to smell after rain. You know, when it rains, and I have to say that smell. I love that smell. It's called Petrichor. It's really, really cool. But yeah, I'll play you like a medley of a few of my songs. It's fun. I'll just combine them and play them.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Over to you.
All right.
How do you take this thing off there?
All right. Let me mute it for 2 seconds while I switch the wires.
This is so cool, getting a live performance.
That
Wow.
was really cool.
That was so cool. And you know what I think is so cool too is that you made that guitar and all of the, you know, the whole electronics, the whole carpentry part of it, you painted it up and you've taught yourself how to play it. Wow. Thank you so, so much, both James and Matt, for joining us today. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you. Now, I wanted to, I'm just really aware that we're going way over time, and maybe people would like to stick around longer than what we'd planned, but that's totally fine. I wanted to see if there's any burning questions that anyone had to ask you before we hand over to Eve and Eleni. Does anyone have anything that they want to ask, Matt or James? I can't actually see anyone there because we'll go back into gallery view. We've got Kim. Kim, go ahead.
Hi, guys. That was amazing, Matt. Really inspirational. I was just wondering if I can connect with you via email. I'm a teacher and I'm hoping to write a regenerative program in Australia, and I'd love to use some of your amazing resources. Obviously not use them, but share with you, talk with you about them. Would that be possible?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I always, if a teacher emails me at matt@thepermaculturestudent.com, I usually just give them all my resources digitally. Like I just like copy my current ebook folder and then just dump it, because we need the resources, and they're already made, and you can start, you know, using them in the classroom, and then you'd be like, you know what, Matt, you need to add this, you know, and then suddenly you start growing, and or you're like, I'm gonna do my own.
Yeah, that's fabulous, Matt. I'll email you. I'm really excited, and thank you so much for everything that you're doing. I'm really impressed.
Thanks, Kim. Thanks, Matt. Does anyone else have any questions who's here? And I think what I'd like to suggest too is that Matt has given his email, and we will share that again with the link, that if you'd like to ask him a question or to find out more about his work, then I'm sure he'd be very happy to communicate with you. I'm saying that, and I'm looking at Matt for a nod, and I'm thinking that's a nod. All right. Oh, thank you so much.
I just noticed there was a Robinson in the house, so I was like, there's a Robinson right there. I see you. I see you.
Hi.
Say hi to everybody for me.